Along with extra time and lower instances of unpredictable weather, there are a variety of benefits that come with fall ESN application. Learn more at smartnitrogen.com.
John Haney here with Real Agriculture. We're going to continue our journey talking to the inductees for the 2024 class into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. Today's discussion is with a profound, just an unbelievable forage plant breeder. His contribution to the industry is quite frankly amazing. Dr. Bruce Coulman he's a distinguished Canadian agricultural scientist and plant breeder, recognized for groundbreaking work in forage crop breeding and genetics. Over his career, he's made quite frankly significant contributions to the development of improved forage varieties that benefit both the agriculture and livestock industries. Coulman's research has led to increased yields, enhanced disease resistance, and better adaptation to Canadian growing conditions across a number of different species. Look forward to my conversation with him. Hope you enjoy it. Dr. Coulman, congratulations on being one of this year's inductees into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much.
So what did you think? What went through your mind when you heard, whether that was via phone? First of all, how did you find out?
Well, I was called on the weekend by a former colleague in the Crop Development Center at the University of Saskatchewan. He left a message, actually. I didn't get the call immediately, and he said, "Bruce, I've got some really good news for you, so call me back." And so I did eventually get a hold of him, and he said, "Yeah, you're going to be inducted into the Canadian Agriculture Hall of Fame." So I was very surprised. And, upon thinking about it more and looking at who is already in the Hall of Fame, it's really a great honor to join some of these folks who are in the Canadian Agriculture Hall of Fame.
I have interviewed a number of inductees over the years, and I find that's a typical response is that when they look at the peer group, the rest of the people that are in that, in that club, so to speak, it's kind of a little bit overwhelming. It's a sobering sort of reality, and just it feels heavy. It's very significant. So you should feel very accomplished in this recognition. Can you share what inspired you to originally take this career when it came to plant breeding?
Yeah, I guess I started working at the then crop science department at the University of Saskatchewan when I was in high school. And so, I was out in the plots and I started talking to people and thought, this is kind of potentially a neat thing that I think I would like doing. And so I decided to enroll in the College of Agriculture when I finished high school and continued to work in the plot area and the plant breeding plots and whatnot. And it's just gone that way since and haven't regretted it.
And I'm sure there's lots of accomplishments, but if I was to ask you, what's that one thing in your career that makes you the most proud? What would it be?
Well, I don't know whether there's one thing actually that there's several things which I have found very satisfying over my career, and of course, I have an interest in genetics and plant breeding, and so that was the core of my research work, and it led to the development of a number of varieties, and a lot of them were actually widely used by farmers. So this is gives one a great deal of satisfaction. But the other things that I've really enjoyed are mentoring students, particularly graduate students from all over the world, and seeing them go on to have very distinguished careers. And I've also had the opportunity to actually be involved in a lot of research and development activities in other countries, and I've very much enjoyed this, learned a lot from it, and I hopefully have made some contributions to the folks in those countries as well. made a lot of good friends in these activities.
Yeah, and one of the things I when I think about plant breeders and their accomplishment is your work, your finished product, that variety that gets commercialized and enters the market, it touches a lot of farms. And it's different than, say, researching, weed science or entomology. It, it's a little bit from a different angle. I just, to me, there's a little bit more like, you talked about mentoring students, but like those are something that you and your team produced to create value for farmers over a very wide geography. There's just a kind of a different angle of pride when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And the other thing about plant breeding, at least in public plant breeding organizations, which I was involved in over the years, and our organizations are involved in the research and the development of these varieties, but we're not involved in the seed increase nor the marketing of the varieties.
Right.
So this leads us to set up partnerships with the Canadian seed industry. And so they are the ones that actually do the increase of the seed. We produce the breeder seed, but the rest of the increase is done by seed growers in the seed industry. And so I made tremendous contacts, a lot of good friends in this industry.
Yeah.
And so they're the ones that actually get it out for the farmers. And once the farmers start using it, I made a lot of really good contacts, visited a lot of the farms that people are using the varieties, and it's been a very gratifying experience in developing these varieties and seeing them used and having an impact.
So why forages?
Well, that's a good question, actually. When I started out, working in the summers, I was actually more in the cereals area, but I think it was probably in my second year of university, I got a job with the federal government, with the Agriculture and Agri-Food Research Center, which is right on the university campus here in Saskatoon. And so the person that I was working for was a scientist by the name of Dr. Bob Knowles. And so he became my mentor, and I ended up, working at the AFC research station for the rest of my university career, and then ended up doing a master's degree with him. So it was just something that I got into and found it really interesting, and so just continued on with it.
Hmm. Are we attracting? You mentioned the mentoring of young students. Are we attracting enough people into this area?
In forage breeding or plant breeding?
Well, I was thinking in general, but yeah, you can
Yeah.
tackle forages too if you want to be more specific.
Yeah. No, well, I think that the University of Saskatchewan has many breeding programs, and so I think it's been very successful at attracting students to the programs. The students come from many countries of the world. Some of them are local students, but I don't think there's been any real problem attracting students to plant breeding. There seems to be a lot of interest in it, and so most of the positions that come open are filled with very good candidates.
Is there a variety that you were a big part of, creating or producing the finished product that you're the most proud of?
Well, I guess I'm proud of several of them, but I think the one that I would be most proud of would be the hybrid brome grass, which is a cross between meadow and smooth brome grass. And my mentor Bob Knowles actually got this started way back in the 1970s, and partly when I was actually still a student at that time. And so when I took over the program, which was in the early 90s, there was this material there, but it needed quite a bit more work. And when you do cross different species, you have problems with sometimes with sterility and lack of seed production and non-uniformity. So that a lot of that has to be worked out. So we worked really hard to get those things ironed out. And I think that this has been a type of brome grass which has been really interesting to producers because it produces quite a good yield for hay in the spring, and then it regrows quite well afterwards for grazing purposes. So it's actually been quite popular. So I think of the varieties that we've developed, I think that's probably
Yeah.
the one that I guess I'm most interested in and most proud of. And so over the years, we released three of those hybrid brome varieties. And my successor is still working on the program and has released another one as well.
Oh,
So
really? Okay.
yes,
That's great. And who's your successor?
well, my successor is a scientist by the name of Dr. Bill Igatu, and I met Bill in China, in Inner Mongolia, with the project that I was working on there, and he actually was helping out with the project. He was a master's student at Inner Mongolia Agriculture University at that time, but he spoke English quite well. He spoke Chinese and he also spoke Mongolian. So in the project that we were working on, that was very useful. So I got to know him quite well, and I said, well, would you be interested in doing a PhD? Come to Canada and do a PhD. So he did that, did his PhD, and then he went on and worked as a postdoc with Agriculture Canada for a number of years. And when I came up for retirement, he was one of the people that applied, and he got the job. And he's just doing a tremendous job with the program. He's been in it for about 10 years and really productive guy.
It sounds like there's quite a successful chain there of succession. You being mentored and then
Yep.
taking over the program, and then a great career, and then having somebody capable and able for you to pass it on to take over and know that, hey, you know what, take it from here and achieve even greater things. That takes comfort in your own skin from a leadership standpoint for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that my mentor was really happy that, I came into the program and took it over. And I'm just delighted
Yeah.
that Bill has taken it over and just is doing so well. Yeah,
Plant
no,
breeding,
it's very gratifying. Yeah.
plant, bre- plant breeding it's really changed. As well. The technologies available to you, the tools,
Right. Right.
the data crunching. I'm sure there's lots of, you go to a plant breeding meeting, I'm sure there's lots to talk about artificial intelligence and all those
Hmm.
kinds of things.
Yeah.
Talk about some of those big changes you've seen over your career.
Well, there has been changes, and it the one thing that hasn't changed is it takes quite a bit of time
Yeah.
to develop varieties. And
More
so you
than
have to
people
have a lot of
think.
patience. You have to have a
Yeah.
lot of patience in this business. But no, there are technologies, marker assisted selection, genomic analysis, et cetera, that have allowed us to speed it up and, of course, look at things in much more detail than we were able to do. In my career, I didn't get heavily into these areas, but I was more of a traditional plant breeding. But my successor is using a lot of these technologies now
Yeah.
in the breeding.
There's like and when you talk about, I was doing more traditional, I think of the art of it and the years of experience compounding. And I grew up in the seed industry, so we weren't in forages, but we were definitely in cereals, and I was around a lot of canola breeders. And there's like this art to it, and that strong relationship to, as you mentioned, the seed industry, the grower being really
Right.
critical.
Yeah. No, it's that with all of these technologies, the thing to remember is that the material has to be grown in the field. It has to do well in the field, have good adaptation. So all of the breeding nurseries, et cetera, a lot of this work, most of this work is still done in the field.
Yeah.
And so I think there's certainly science to this, but that's where the art comes in as well. And in selecting materials, experienced plant breeders seem to know, what are the best materials, and so it is to some extent an art, but obviously a science as well, determining which are the best parents to cross and doing a good evaluation of them to get the best material.
Yeah, well, you say patience, and I think that's a bit of
Mhm.
an understatement, right? Like I work on a project and it may be 3 months long, and it
Mhm.
goes well, great. And if sometimes they don't work out, and it's like, okay, we're moving on. You're talking about years.
Absolutely. And I guess the best example that I can give you is I
Yeah.
started my professional career actually at McDonald campus of McGill University in 1976. It was only in the early 90s when the varieties started to come out. So there was almost 15 years in the development. So at that time, I took over a program a breeding program which they had done forage breeding at McDonald, but nobody had been doing it for quite some years. So it was basically like starting over. When I went to Agriculture Canada in Saskatoon in 1993, I took over a program which already had a lot of things in the pipeline. And so my first variety was released in 4 years um, there, and then many others after that. So if you're starting from scratch, it takes a long time to get these things going. If you're taking over a pipeline with materials at all stages of development, it doesn't take as long.
There's like through that like, yeah, like 4 years, 15 years, like those two great examples you just gave. Those are examples where there was success getting things to the market, but there's also like that where you have a line, you feel confident about it, it looks good, and then maybe three-quarters of the way down the track, something turns out where it doesn't pass some of the specs, or the some of
Right. Yeah.
the data, and you got to basically fold the tent on it. And
Yeah.
you've got
Oh,
years
oh,
committed to it.
absolutely. Yeah, that's
That's
right.
that's got to be discouraging,
And
isn't it?
well, well, yeah, it could be. It is discouraging, or it can be discouraging. But as long as you have materials that are successful, then that's okay. You're not going to get too depressed about the whole thing. But no, I mean the ultimate uh, test is those final trials in the field over several years. And so the materials that you've developed over 10 or whatever years, they can be thrown in the garbage at that stage. So, but, you know, I guess to some extent it's a numbers game. As long as some of them are passing the test and are successful in being used, it, keeps you going.
The the cattle sector always faces ups and downs, and we've been in a struggle to rebuild the cow herd in Canada. The
Mm-hmm.
U.S. has gone through a little bit more ups and downs. Didn't have to deal with BSE and some of the impacts that we had.
Right.
That still
Right.
face those hangovers today. As somebody that was in forage breeding, did you feel that at all when it came to some of the funding of the program, or were you was that kind of isolated in terms of the size, what was happening with the cow herd, and from a demand standpoint?
Yeah. The funding has always been I would say a bigger problem in the forage breeding world, actually. And it's changed in the last 20 years. And, I kind of wondered why I should retire because there was actually a lot more money for forage breeding. And I think that probably I guess, just after 2000, um, well, maybe probably after 2005, the price of grain of just about all commodities, the seed commodities, increased greatly
Yeah.
in Western Canada. And of course, the cattle people were really dependent on cheap barley and whatnot for feed, and so they became realized that you know forages are really quite important as feed sources for our industry, and so today they put a lot more funding in forage research. And so, yeah, I think that one issue of
Yeah.
grain prices, kind of going sky high at some point, actually really spurred on a lot more interest and funding for forage
Well,
crop
and
research.
yeah, and I would think now with the increased use of cover crops, which include forages, that I think that would have an impact too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it has cover crops are usually more annual species rather than perennials, although perennials can be used just for a year. But generally, the annuals will produce a lot more biomass in the year of seeding, and so it has, I guess, led some work on more on annuals, and certainly our own program became more interested in things like barley and oats
Yeah.
in the later part of the program as well.
Earlier, you mentioned relationship with members of the value chain, stakeholders. Oh, I just want to go back to that and as a public plant breeder, collaboration.
Right.
Research institutions, the university, the
Mhm.
grower, just funding mechanisms. Just talk about the importance of all that collaboration and making that all hum as efficiently or as productive as possible, so that you could have the best, produce the best varieties that you're capable of.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as determining priorities for the program, in general, nowadays, producer groups fund a lot of agriculture research, including breeding programs. And so they are front and center in determining priorities now for breeding. They always have been, because I think that successful plant breeders have spent a lot of time talking to producers and speaking at producer events, etc. And so really knew what was needed. And so in terms of deciding what you're going to breed and some of the goals of the breeding program, it's really fed by a lot of information received from the ultimate users of the program. So collaboration is extremely important. The other thing is that particularly for forages, the economic part of the plant is not the seed, but it is the vegetative material of the plant. That's what cattle eat. But one has to have a decent seed yield, because what the seed that is increased and that the farmers ultimately plant, there has to be an adequate amount of it, and it has to be at a reasonable price. And so there are examples of forages where they're otherwise had excellent forage characteristics, but they went nowhere because they were poor seed yielders, and it was difficult to find growers to grow the seeds. You had to offer a big premium, and then it was ultimately too expensive for producers to be interested in it. So the seed yield had to go, in terms of our breeding programs, you had to pay attention to the seed yield as well if the variety was going to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, that and unfortunately there's a balancing act there too, right? Like
Yeah,
those
absolutely.
those those seed yield and material, it may work in opposite directions. Like we see in other crops as well. It's really creating
Yes.
that balance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, they often are negatively related, so you do have to get the balance. So, well, generally in our breeding nurseries, we were selecting for forage characteristics, but we'd all at some point we would also evaluate seed yield to make sure that we weren't the variety wasn't going to fail because of seed problems.
Yeah. From for for forage, where else in the world were you reaching out to, and some of those collaborations with other breeders looking for material around the world?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit.
Well, we did have often we would bring in material from gene banks, from around the world. I had collaborations with folks in northern China, and we exchanged germplasm quite a bit. We had collaborations with U.S. breeders. As a matter of fact, the forage breeders, both in the U.S. and Canada, had an annual meeting where we get together, and often we'd have collaborative projects over numerous sites in northern United States and Canada, and so we would get together and have a meeting every year to discuss results and plan new projects. So there was quite a bit of collaboration with folks in other countries to exchange material and collaborate with them on projects.
In forages, is there some of the concerns out there that access to that gene pool is shrinking, or is that not a thing in forages?
Well, it wasn't it wasn't as much of a thing in forages. Yeah, generally most of the people that are involved in forage breeding are quite generous in sharing material, and it really wasn't that much of a problem.
And so somebody that, is listening to this and not totally in this space, you're looking for, and I'm going to kind of explain. You tell me, no, Sean, that's wrong. But you're looking for opposites, right? Like you're for different characteristics, from a disease resistance perspective, or like why are you having to go around the world looking for different pieces of material?
Well, I guess one thing is that most of the species that we worked on were not did not originate from Canada,
Yeah.
and so going to the areas where these species were native could provide different germplasm for disease resistance, and by crossing with the material that was good in Canada, we could add more genetic variability to our lines, and so it's useful to bring in this type of material. We also did work on native Canadian species as well. And so one of the challenges with these was largely seed production as well, because uh, they hadn't, a lot of them hadn't been domesticated. And so they didn't produce much seed. The seed shattered long before you could harvest it, that sort of thing. So there were a number of challenges there, but we did do quite a bit of work on native species as well, and we in collaboration with Ducks Unlimited, actually, Ducks Unlimited Canada, we developed what are called ecological varieties or ecovars
Oh.
of Canadian native species. But the other species, the alfalfas, the brome grasses, etc., we would assess material from other parts of the world as well.
Is there anything that comes to mind when I ask about misconceptions or misunderstandings about what plant breeders do, or what your function is? Or I know that comes up for me when I'm having a cold one with a neighbor, and it's like, oh, you host a radio show. That's then they'll tell me about stuff. I'm like, no, that's not actually not what I do. Is there any misconceptions out there for plant breeders?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people don't know what plant breeders do actually, and it's a fairly, as far as a career, it's a fairly small. There's not very many plant breeders, so I would suspect that the general public wouldn't know exactly what a plant breeder does. Um, I think a lot of the producers, in talking to them and giving talks at producer meetings, the seed industry as well, we I think they know what plant breeders do, and we can talk about our programs,
Yeah.
and I think they're aware of what goes on.
Highly valued part for sure. Everything starts with the seed, right, Bruce?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the ceremony in November,
Yes,
they I've been to the ceremony before, and they unveil painted portraits
right,
of
right.
all the inductees. What do you think's going to go through your mind when you see that portrait?
Well, I guess I've had some experience quite recently because I was inducted into the Saskatchewan Ag Hall of Fame
Mhm.
this April, and so we had a ceremony. I think it's probably a similar ceremony to the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame as well. And it yeah, you're up on stage, and the portrait is unveiled, and it makes you very proud. Uh, the portraits are quite well done, and so I haven't seen the portrait yet that will be unveiled, but at the Canadian Ag Hall of Fame. But I'm sure looking at the portraits on the website, it's going to be really good.
Great
Yeah,
stuff.
and so
Well,
yeah, yeah,
Bruce, want to congratulate you and enjoy yourself at the ceremony,
yeah.
and a great career, such a contribution to agriculture. Forage growers across Canada and beyond owe a lot of gratitude to you for the value created further operations. So on behalf of all of them, I want to say thank you and congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, and I've enjoyed all of my career. I'd do it over again if I had the opportunity. Yeah.